Changes in demand. It is important to make a distinction between the change in demand and the change in quantity demanded to distinguish a shift in the demand curve from a movement along demand curve. Changes in demand curve. Classify the changes in demand curve into two: movement along the demand curve and shift in demand curve. The changes in demand curve occur due to the change in price alone is known as movement along the demand curve. It happens when there is either an upward or a downward movement along the demand curve. The consumer will consume the good coffee in here. So, she is a consumer. She purchases the number of coffees at the given price level. So here shows the demand curve of her purchasing level of a commodity. So here shows the inverse relationship between price and quantity of coffee shows in the demand curve. So here, when the price of coffee goes up, the quantity demanded of coffee falls. As the result, the demand curve shifts upward. The decrease in quantity of coffee, then 60 to 12, then the price of coffee increase 2 to 3. So here the point of A to C, the inverse direction of point AB is called the contraction of demand. So here, as a result of increase in price of coffee, we move from point A to point C. So when the price falls, then 3 to 2, then the quantity of coffee increase 12 to 60. So as the result, the demand curve shifts downward. The increase in quantity as a result of decrease in price of its coffee is known as the expansion of demand. Here, as the result of decrease in price of coffee, we move from point A to B. So his consumption level is based on the price of the commodity coffee and other non-price factors. But here, not important to non-price factors like money, then preference and taste, and their fashion, and their other technologies, and their happiness. So they are not interfere to her consumption of the coffee. So his consumption of the product coffee only related to his price. So in the demand curve moved. So it is.
Knowing the difference between supply and demand can be easy, but learning the factors that can move those curves can be tricky. In this case, we'll be looking at the causes of a shift in the demand curve on a graph. But first, what is a demand curve? A demand curve is a graph showing how the demand for a commodity or service varies with changes in its price. So then what shifts a demand curve? Well, there are 5 big causes of shift. These include changes in income. If our income increases, will we demand more or less of an item? And if our income decreases, how will that affect demand? When income increases, we demand more, so the demand curve will shift to the right. When income decreases, we demand less, so the demand curve shifts to the left. Price of related goods. If I eat English muffins and butter every morning for breakfast, and I notice that English muffins are buy one get one free, the demand will shift to the right because my demand for those English muffins increases. But and vice versa, if the price of English muffins increased $3, then I will decide to eat cereal this week for breakfast instead, which is a substitute good, and the demand for English muffins will shift to the left. Changes in taste and preferences. So the biggest item on the market right now is fidget spinners. Why is that? Well, fidget spinners are more quote-unquote fashionable. They're the hottest item right now, so the demand shifts to the right. However, say a fidget cube takes the limelight and everybody thinks fidget spinners are so lame now because these cool fidget cubes have everything you could possibly want. What does this do to the demand of fidget spinners? If you said shifts to the left, then you are correct. Future expectations. If I think that English muffins are going to go on sale next week, then I'm not going to buy them this week because I think the price will be cheaper soon. This causes a demand curve to shift to the left. Number of buyers. Look at ice cream stands, for example. During the summer, their sales skyrocket because the number of buyers increase when the temperature increases. This causes a demand curve to shift to the right. But what happens in the winter when it's cold and everybody wants to be warm inside? Well, the demand curve for the ice cream shifts to the left because people don't want to be eating ice cream in the cold. Now that you're a master on the shifts of a demand curve, it's time for you to learn the supply curve.
Created using Powtoon.
So, what is movement in demand curve? If the quantity demanded of a commodity increases or decreases due to the rise or fall in the prices of that commodity, there is a movement in demand curve. Now there is two types of movement in demand curve. First is upward movement, second is downward movement. Now upward movement represents the contraction in demand, that is the fall in demand due to the price rise, while downward movement is an indicator of expansion of demand, that is there is an increase in demand due to the fall in the prices of the commodity. Now come, let's discuss the upward movement and downward movement with the help of a diagram. So here is our demand curve. P is price, Q is quantity demanded, and A is the equilibrium point. Now, if the price of the product changes from 100 rupees to 120 rupees, then it will affect the quantity demanded and the curve will move upward. As you can see, as the price of the commodity increases, the quantity demanded decreases. So there is an upward movement in demand curve. Now, if the price of the commodity changes from 100 rupees to 60 rupees, then the change in the price will lead to the downward movement of the demand curve. As you can see in the figure, as the price of the commodity changes, the quantity demanded increases automatically, and there is an downward movement in the demand curve. Now let's discuss shift in the demand curve. When the demand of a product or service rises or falls due to change in the factors like income of the consumer, price of related goods, consumers' expectations, changes in taste and preferences of consumer, etc., then there is a shift in demand curve. So shift in demand curve causes because of non-price determinants. Now there are two types of shift in demand curve: leftward shift and rightward shift. The leftward shift in demand curve indicates the decrease in demand due to factors other than price. So if there is a fall in the demand of the commodity, it is called as leftward shift. And if there is a rise in demand of the commodity, then there is a rightward shift. Now we will discuss this leftward shift and rightward shift with the help of a diagram. So here is a demand curve. This is the price of commodity P. This is the demand Q. Now if there is a rise in the income of the consumer or the price of complementary goods falls down, then there would be an increase in the demand for the commodity, which will appear like this. That is, there would be a rightward shift in the demand curve. In this case, the whole curve will shift rightwards. And suppose if the income of the consumers falls down or the price of the complementary goods goes up, then there would be an leftward shift in demand, which would appear like this, showing that there would be an decrease in demand due to the non-price determinants. So here one thing is to be noted, that the price of the commodity remains constant at all the levels, but the demand for the product changes with the change in the non-price determinants.